Every 40 seconds, somewhere on this planet, someone has a stroke. By the time this sentence is finished, another brain has just been hit. Every single year, stroke kills nearly 6 million people worldwide. It is the second leading cause of death globally, and the #1 reason people end up living with permanent disability. And here is the part that most doctors do not say clearly enough. In a large number of cases, the brain gives you very specific warnings, hours before, sometimes a full day before the big stroke hits. Clear, identifiable signals that something is seriously wrong. Most people miss them completely, not because they weren't paying attention, but because nobody ever taught them what those warnings actually look like. That changes today. I'm Dr. Sarah Ellison, and I've spent over a decade as a practicing physician focused on cardiovascular and neurological health, specifically in older adults. So today, I am going to walk you through exactly what your brain looks like the day before a stroke hits, the 5 warning signs that appear beforehand, what is actually happening inside your body when they show up, what silently damages your blood vessels for years before any of this happens, and most importantly, what to do the moment you notice any of these signs. Stay with me through this entire video, because the information in the second half could be the most important thing you hear this year. Before we get to the warnings, you need to understand what we are actually talking about, because when most people hear the word stroke, they picture one thing, but stroke is actually 2 very different events happening inside the brain. The first type is called a hemorrhagic stroke. A blood vessel inside the brain bursts. Blood pours into or around brain tissue, forms a clot that compresses everything around it, and a significant number of those patients do not survive. The second type is called an ischemic stroke. The vessel does not tear, it gets blocked. Blood flow stops to a section of the brain, and the brain cells in that zone begin dying within 4 to 6 minutes. Here is why that matters. Ischemic strokes make up roughly 85% of all strokes. That is the one we are focused on today. Now, to understand why every single minute counts, you need to appreciate just how demanding your brain actually is. Your brain weighs about 1.4 kilograms, only about 2% of your total body weight. But it consumes 20% of the oxygen you breathe and 25% of all the glucose circulating in your blood. It is the most energy-hungry organ in your body, and it never, ever turns off. Cut that fuel supply for even a few minutes, and cells start dying in ways that cannot be reversed. That is why doctors say time is brain. It is not a metaphor. It is a biological reality. And here is the part most people never hear. For a brain artery to suddenly block, groundwork usually took years. The vessel walls were slowly being damaged. Cholesterol and clots were quietly building up. The opening was getting tighter, month by month, year by year. A stroke is not an explosion out of nowhere. It is the final step of a long, silent process. And along that road, your body usually sends out warning shots. In medicine, those early warning signals have a name. They are called a transient ischemic attack, or TIA for short. Transient simply means temporary. It comes and then it goes. Here is how it happens. Picture one of your carotid arteries, the large artery running up the side of your neck, carrying blood from your heart up to your brain. Over years, a fatty plaque has been forming on the inner wall, right where the artery branches. The opening has been slowly narrowing. Then, at some point, that already tight vessel goes into a brief spasm. Blood flow stops for a few seconds, maybe a few minutes. The brain region fed by that artery essentially goes dark for that short time. You feel a symptom. Then the spasm relaxes, blood flow returns, and the symptom fades. And you think you are fine. But here is what the research actually shows. A TIA very often comes right before a major ischemic stroke, typically within the next 72 hours. Those 3 days are your window, the window where the disaster can still be stopped. Most people do not use that window because the warning episode was brief, strange, and then it went away on its own. So they talk themselves out of taking it seriously. They say, Maybe I was dehydrated. Maybe I stood up too fast. Maybe it was nothing. It was not nothing. These episodes usually last anywhere from 30 seconds to 10 minutes. That is exactly why they slip through the cracks. You could be in the middle of making breakfast, stepping out of the shower, getting into your car, and by the time you stop and think about what just happened, the symptom has already passed. But each one of those moments is your brain sending you a final, very clear message. I am in serious trouble. Please listen. So let me walk you through the 5 warning signs, and I want you to understand not just what they look like, but what is actually happening inside your body each time one of them appears. Warning sign 1, temporary blindness in one eye. You are going about your morning, you get up, walk toward the kitchen, and suddenly one eye goes dark. Not blurry, dark, like someone pulled a black curtain down over that eye, or smeared the lens with gray fog. You blink a few times, maybe rub the eye, and within seconds, or a minute at most, your vision comes back completely. So you blame it on standing up too fast, too much screen time the night before, and you move on with your day. But here is what was actually happening in that moment. A tiny clot, or a small fragment of plaque that broke off from the wall of your carotid artery, traveled upward and briefly the artery that feeds your eye. And this is critical to understand. The artery to your eye is not some isolated tube. It is a direct branch of the internal carotid artery, the same artery that feeds your brain. When that clot wedges into the tiny eye artery, the retina loses its blood supply for a brief moment, and you see darkness. When the clot drifts away and blood flow restarts, the vision returns, and you feel relieved. But that clot could have traveled 2 millimeters in a different direction into a brain artery, and instead of a 60-second blackout in one eye, you would be looking at permanent loss of speech, paralysis down one side of your body, or death. Neurologists have a name for this one-eye blackout, amaurosis fugax, Latin for fleeting blindness. And when a patient describes this experience, it is treated like a fire alarm going off. Because hospital records show a pattern again and again. A person has 2 or 3 of these brief eye episodes, brushes them off, and the very next one is a full stroke in the brain. Do not brush it off. Warning sign 2, sudden one-sided numbness or tingling. This one catches people off guard because it can feel so ordinary at first. You are sitting or walking or in the middle of a conversation, and suddenly part of your body feels wrong. It might be the whole arm, just the hand, half the face, or one entire side of your body. It feels like pins and needles, or like that body part has been wrapped in cotton or turned to rubber. And then, after a few minutes, it fades. Now, most of us have experienced numbness from sleeping on an arm the wrong way. That is completely different. When a nerve gets compressed by posture, the problem is local, in the limb itself. As soon as position and circulation normalize, the sensation returns within a minute or 2. Nothing is happening in the brain. With a TIA, the problem is not in the arm. It is in the brain region responsible for processing sensation from that arm. And here is the detail that matters most. Stroke symptoms are almost always one-sided. That is because each hemisphere of your brain controls and receives sensation from the opposite side of your body. So when both hands go numb evenly, that is more likely a neck or spine issue. But sudden numbness on one side only, face, arm, leg, or all 3 together, that resolves on its own after a few minutes, that is a strong red flag for TIA. Do not let the fact that it went away convince you that it did not happen. Warning sign 3, sudden loss of coordination or balance. Picture this. You are walking across a flat, familiar floor in your own home, a floor you have walked across 1,000 times, and suddenly your foot lands in the wrong place. Your leg feels rubbery or weak. You stagger slightly into the wall, or you are hit without any warning by an intense spinning sensation, so strong that you grab the nearest chair or door frame to steady yourself, even though nothing around you is moving. The part of your brain responsible for balance and smooth coordinated movement is called the cerebellum. It sits at the base of your skull and works constantly in the background, calculating where your body is in space, coordinating how hard each muscle fires, keeping you walking straight instead of veering sideways. The cerebellum gets its blood supply from arteries that travel up through the bones of your neck into the back of your head, what doctors call the vertebro-basilar system. If blood flow in those arteries drops even briefly, the cerebellum essentially glitches, and that is when you suddenly misstep, stagger, or feel that violent dizziness out of nowhere. Here is how to tell the difference between a TI-related episode and ordinary dizziness. Benign dizziness almost always has a clear trigger: rolling over in bed, turning your head quickly, a known inner ear condition. But spontaneous, intense dizziness that comes with any difficulty walking in a straight line with no obvious trigger should be treated as a possible TI until a doctor rules out a vascular cause. Do not write it off as tiredness or bad shoes. Warning sign 4: speech that suddenly breaks down. Before I explain this one, I want to make something clear. Occasionally forgetting the right word in a conversation, that happens to everyone, especially when you are tired or stressed. That is a normal tip of the tongue moment, and it is not what we are talking about here. What concerns neurologists is something quite different. When your speech suddenly breaks down so badly that even you can feel that something is seriously wrong. There are two main speech areas in most people's brains, both typically located in the left hemisphere. The first, often called Broca's area, controls your ability to form words and send instructions to the muscles of your lips, tongue, and jaw. When this region loses blood flow, you may understand everything being said around you. You know exactly what you want to say, but you cannot get the words out. They come out slurred, chopped, stuck, or scrambled. The second, often called Wernicke's area, controls your ability to understand speech and organize your own sentences. When this zone is affected, a person may speak fluently, but the words come out as complete nonsense, word salad, and they may not even understand simple sentences directed at them. If either of those things happens suddenly and then fades after a few minutes, that is not tiredness. That is classic TIA behavior. And dismissing it because it's self-corrected is one of the most dangerous mistakes you can make. Think of it like your home alarm going off, stopping on its own, and you deciding it was probably a false alarm. What if it wasn't? Warning sign 5: a sudden severe headache unlike anything you felt before. This one is less talked about, but it is critical, especially for those who do not typically suffer from headaches. Most headaches have a gradual build. Tension, dehydration, sinus pressure, they creep up over minutes or hours. But the headache associated with a vascular emergency is entirely different. It arrives explosively. Patients describe it as the worst headache of their life, often appearing within seconds, like a thunderclap going off inside their skull. This type of headache, especially when combined with any of the other warning signs we just covered, vision changes, one-sided numbness, loss of coordination, or speech problems, is a serious red flag that something dangerous may be happening with the blood vessels in or around your brain. Now, not every severe headache is a stroke warning. Many people have migraines, neck arthritis that radiates pain upward, or even undiagnosed disc issues in the cervical spine that can produce intense head pain. But the key distinction is this: if a headache arrives suddenly, reaches peak intensity within seconds or a minute, and feels completely unlike any headache you have ever had before, particularly if it comes alongside any of the other 4 signs, do not wait it out. Do not take a painkiller and lie down. Get evaluated. Now that you know the 5 warnings, I want to explain what creates the conditions for a stroke in the first place. Because this is where one of the most dangerous myths lives. The myth is this: my cholesterol is normal, so I am safe. That is not how stroke risk works. Stroke risk is not just about what is floating in your blood. It is very much about the condition of the inner lining of your blood vessels, a microscopically thin layer of cells called the endothelium. Think of it like the coating on a nonstick pan. When that coating is smooth and intact, blood flows freely and nothing clings to the walls. But once that surface gets scratched and damaged, everything starts to stick. Cholesterol, platelets, inflammatory proteins, they all begin building up into the plaques that narrow and harden your arteries over time. So what damages that lining in the first place? The first major enemy is chronically high blood sugar. When blood sugar stays elevated, even slightly above normal, even in the pre-diabetes range, endothelial cells begin to starve and deteriorate. They lose their shape and can even peel away from the inner surface, leaving behind rough, scarred patches. Those patches cannot flex properly when blood pressure changes, and they become perfect landing zones for plaque and clot formation. This process starts years before anyone officially diagnoses diabetes. Pre-diabetes alone is enough to quietly injure your vessels for a long time. The second enemy is smoking. With every cigarette, toxic compounds hit the inner surface of your blood vessels and cause direct chemical damage and inflammation. At the same time, nicotine and carbon monoxide make your blood thicker and stickier, increasing how easily clots form. When you combine a damaged, inflamed vessel wall with thick, clot-prone blood, you have created near-perfect conditions for a brain artery to block. Smokers carry roughly 2 to 4 times the ischemic stroke risk of non-smokers with otherwise similar numbers. And then there is blood pressure. And here is the twist that surprises most people. Many seniors are afraid of high blood pressure readings, and rightfully so. Chronic hypertension physically stresses and weakens vessel walls over years and is one of the strongest stroke risk factors we know of. But an ischemic stroke often does not happen at the peak of blood pressure. It happens at a relative low point. Picture a brain artery that is already narrowed by more than half because of plaque, like a water pipe someone has squeezed in the middle. As long as the pressure in the system is high enough, blood still squeezes through. But if overall pressure drops, the flow through that narrowed segment can stop almost entirely. At night, while you sleep, blood pressure naturally dips by 15 to 20%. That is completely normal physiology. But if you already have a critically narrowed artery, that nighttime dip can be enough to turn a partial blockage into a complete one. That is one reason some people go to bed feeling perfectly fine and wake up with stroke symptoms, or don't wake up at all. So now you know what to look for. But knowing the signs is only half of it. The other half is knowing what to do the moment one of them appears, because your response in that window matters enormously. The single most important thing I can tell you is this: do not dismiss it just because it went away. You have roughly 72 hours from the moment a TIA occurs where decisive action can still prevent the full stroke from happening. Do not waste that window convincing yourself it was nothing. First, do not drive yourself anywhere. If you just experienced vision loss in one eye, sudden speech difficulty, or a balance episode, getting behind the wheel is not just dangerous for you, it is dangerous for everyone around you. Make sure someone you trust knows what happened and can get you to care. Second, if you are waiting for help or on your way to be evaluated, body position matters. Lying flat is generally better than sitting upright because it supports blood flow to the brain. A comfortable flat position with your legs slightly elevated above chest level is ideal. Keep your head neutral, not bent sharply forward, not tilted back, so the vessels in your neck are not kinked or compressed. Third, and this is critical, do not take blood thinners on your own, not aspirin, not anything. I know it sounds intuitive to thin the blood if you think a clot is forming, but there are 2 types of stroke. One involves a blocked vessel, and one involves a bleeding vessel. Blood thinners can help in one situation and make the other dramatically, rapidly worse. The only way to know which type is occurring is with a brain scan in a hospital. No one, not even a physician, can determine this by looking at symptoms alone. And finally, keep a written list of every medication you take regularly, somewhere easy to find. not on your phone behind a password, written down in a drawer on the fridge. Emergency teams can act faster when they know exactly what is already in your system. If you have experienced even one of the 5 warning signs, even briefly, even months ago, there are 3 specific evaluations worth asking your doctor about. Each one looks at a different piece of the stroke puzzle. The first is a carotid duplex ultrasound. Unlike a standard ultrasound that just shows structure, this test shows both the anatomy of your carotid artery and how blood is actually flowing through it, including whether the flow becomes turbulent and fast through a narrowed section. If your carotid artery is narrowed by more than roughly 70% due to plaque buildup, that is what doctors call hemodynamically significant stenosis. At that point, the question is no longer whether a stroke might happen, it is when, if nothing changes. In those cases, surgeons may recommend a procedure called carotid endarterectomy, where the artery is opened and the plaque is removed. It sounds major, but in modern practice, it is a routine, well-established practice. Surgery that prevents tens of thousands of strokes every year. The second test is an HbA1c blood test, glycated hemoglobin. This test measures your average blood sugar over the past 3 months, not just a single morning snapshot. It works by measuring how much sugar has attached itself to the hemoglobin in your red blood cells. The higher your blood sugar has been over time, the more of your hemoglobin becomes sugar-coated. This test is especially valuable because it catches the gray zone, pre-diabetes, where blood sugar has been elevated long enough to damage your vessels, but no one has labeled it diabetes yet. A result below 5.7% is normal. Between 5.7 and 6.4% signals pre-diabetes. At 6.5% or above, that is diabetes. If you have never had this test, or it has been several years, it is one of the most worthwhile conversations you can have with your doctor. The third test is Holter monitoring, a 24-hour heart rhythm recording. Instead of the brief 20-second ECG taken in a clinic, you wear a small device for a full day while going about your normal life. The reason this matters is that some dangerous heart rhythm problems are intermittent. They appear briefly and then disappear, completely invisible to a short office ECG. The biggest rhythm-related cause of stroke is atrial fibrillation, AFib. In AFib, the upper chambers of the heart stop beating in an organized rhythm and instead quiver chaotically. Blood does not empty smoothly. It churns and swirls, and in that swirling, clots form very easily. Those clots can travel directly to the brain and lodge in an artery. This type of stroke, called cardioembolic stroke, tends to be among the most severe. Many people with AFib feel nothing dramatic, maybe occasional fluttering, maybe they blame it on caffeine or stress. Holter monitoring is what catches these hidden episodes. And if AFib is found, there are well-studied anticoagulant medications that, when properly prescribed and monitored, can reduce stroke risk in AFib patients by 60 to 70%. That is not a small number. That is a life-changing reduction in risk that is entirely within reach. So seniors, any of these appearing for the first time, even briefly, even if they vanish, is a reason to speak to a doctor urgently. And when you do, ask specifically about carotid duplex ultrasound, an HbA1c blood test, and Holter ECG monitoring. Here is your action step before you close this video. Think back over the past several months. Have you experienced any of these 5 things, even once, even mildly? If yes, write it down. Write down exactly what it felt like, how long it lasted, and what you were doing when it happened. Then bring that written description to your doctor. Do not rely on memory in the moment. A written account gives your doctor something concrete to work with. Stroke is partly preventable. The window is real. And now, you know how to see it. And if this video gave you something valuable today, something you will actually remember and act on, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Every video on this channel is built around one goal: giving you the clearest, most practical health information possible so you can protect yourself and the people you love. I'm Dr. Sarah Ellison, and I will see you in the next one.